BBC Sounds, the Scottish Football Podcast
from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to this Eurocentric edition of the Daily Football Podcast with me, Alasdair Lamont. Subscribe if you haven't already by going to BBC Sounds and signing up, and that way you'll never miss an episode. Now then, a big week for Scottish clubs in the group stages of the various European competitions. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a man who knows a thing or two about playing in Europe, Mr. Kenny Miller. Kenny, the fallout from Celtic's defeat by Feyenoord has already been well covered, but I feel like we should just touch on that game briefly before we look ahead to Thursday night. What was your main takeaway from the Celtic game?
Well, listen, it was always going to be a tough start away from home against a decent team, but that's what I felt Feyenoord were. I thought they were a decent team. I didn't think they were a team where you're going to be looking at the return leg in a few months' time. It's a game that Celtic couldn't win. If you get to that stage, you would expect Celtic to have moved on a little bit. The two sending-offs, obviously, they changed the game because I don't think there was too much in the game up until that first goal. And then the second half, obviously, it could have been more, to be honest with you. But I think Celtic Park in a few months' time, that's a game that Celtic could, I think they could win it. Never mind just get points from it. But it's a disappointing start. You know, when you lose your opening game in a Champions League, Europa League group, it always kind of puts you on the back foot a little bit. But it was never going to be easy. Away games in Europe are tough, you know, and I think it turned out to be a tough night for Celtic. But I think obviously the sending-offs played a big part in that as well.
Yeah, well, let's hope for more positive results on Thursday evening when Aberdeen are away to Eintracht Frankfurt in their first ever Europa Conference League match. And Rangers host Real Betis in the Europa League, both games live on BBC Radio Scotland and on all our online and digital platforms. Kenny, let's look at Rangers first. We were both at McDermott Park, where they got a much-needed victory over St Johnstone on Saturday. Aside from the result in that game, what were the main areas, do you think, for positivity for Michael Beale?
Like the result, first and foremost, what was needed. You know, it needed to come in and steady the ship and get back to winning ways after a really tough week just before the international break. But I do feel they're making small strides forward. I think I said it after the game on Saturday that I think the way they're attacking, there seems to be, to me anyway, a little bit more activity, a little bit more movement. It's something I think Rangers over the years have been quite rigid in how they set up to attack and quite static, to be honest with you. And I think over the last, Ross County in particular, there was a good first half. It was quite free-flowing, good link-up with the front three. I think that day it was Roof, Dessers and Lammers. I felt there was good link-up. There was good forward movement from Raskin. Again, a player who obviously is now going to be out for a few weeks, which isn't good. But I think even at St Johnstone, you can see certain attacking traits starting to form in the Rangers team. And this is when people say it takes time and it's going to take players time to gel and all. This is the type of things that they're talking about, is the understanding of what teammates want, how your teammates play. And I don't think it's been massive improvements, but to me, watching it, I'm more pleased now watching it, thinking, right, okay, I feel they're attacking a little bit better in terms of their movements, in terms of a little bit more cohesion. And by the way, that might be, sometimes it's a player that can bring it together, and it's not necessarily a tactic or training. Sometimes it's how a player, and I think Kamal Roof has made a big difference to the front three, front four, front two, what Michael wants to call it. I think he's made a difference, because I think when he plays off the striker and maybe off the left, or he's up there with a partner, because he's got those striker instincts. He wants to get in the box. He wants to run forward. I think he recognises whether it be Danilo at the start of the game at the weekend, or Sima who came on, or Dessers who was at Ross County. He recognises the kind of moves that they're making, and he then makes counter movements. And I think that gives defenders a lot more problems and decisions to make, which then lead to mistakes, it lead to bigger openings. So I do feel he's had a positive impact on the team since he's came back. And obviously that game at Ross County was his first start for a long time. It was good to see him back. And now I think right at the forefront of Michael's thoughts will be keeping him fit, keeping him ready to really impact the team and build by it, because he's, like you said, it's been his first game for a long time. So if he can stay fit and build and get fitter and get better and more used to the players around him, then it could be a big player for Rangers moving forward. So yeah, that would be me. That would be a pause. Like I say, I'm not getting carried away. I'm not thinking, right, this is what it's going to be, because I think it has been small steps. But for me, they're steps in the right direction.
Well, before we venture any further, let's get a flavour of what the Rangers manager was saying when he spoke to the media in his pre-match news conference.
Nico's out until after the international break with a calf problem. Took a kick in the game, and afterwards the kick is given him a problem in his muscle. So him, Todd and Danilo are the three that are missing. One game at a time. We need to get out of the group and get to knockout phases, and then we'll see as we go. As I say, one game at a time. And it's a good group that we're in. Two teams that won their championship last year. Obviously, Real Betis was 6th in La Liga, and they won their group last year with Roma unbeaten. Obviously, Roma went to the final, so they've showed their pedigree in the competition. I think they've recruited well in the summer. So, listen, it's a competitive group, but we're expected to get out of it.
In terms of how you approach Europe and the importance that Europe has for you this season in particular, how would you assess that?
Well, the same as always. There's a financial element, but there's a competition element as well, and you're playing against teams with different styles that are obviously successful in their domestic league, and I think that challenge helps you domestically because obviously the level is high and your team have to get exposed to things, and hopefully it raises the level of your team and players. As a club, we have a huge tradition in Europe and the European nights, and it's important that we have a good season this year in Europe. In the 2 home games so far, we've scored 4 goals against Servette and PSV that we've played in Europe this season. In both games, we felt we could have scored more. So it's important that we take the game to Betis as much as we can and try and create them problems.
I think it's a good thing as well that he's saying that it's a group that he feels they should get out of, because he's no hiding away for that responsibility and giving it the usual generic shouts about it'll be a tough, it's European games and this and that. Well, this is a group they should get out of. It's as simple as that. And if they don't, it will be viewed as a failure. When you're coming in as the top seeds in the group, I think I think that's a real positive statement for Michael to own that and put it right up there at the front, that this is a group that they expect to get out of.
The news about Raskin, that's come as a bit of a surprise to me, Kenny. As we talked about, he played the full 90 at Perth, and it's a blow to lose him. We've got, however, there's supposed about Jose Cifuentes, who arrived with a pretty big reputation, but hasn't featured since that heavy defeat in Eindhoven. I suspect it'll be a case of bringing him in place of Raskin. What do you see as the best midfield combination available right now?
Raskin will be part of it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think, again, this depends. The big guy, I know he's injured at the moment, but it would depend on where you deploy Todd Cantwell. Like this is the whole thing for me, and this again leads into the next thing about the inconsistencies of probably the front 3, the front 4, or whatever it is. That there's no, at this moment in time. I was really excited to see Danilo at the weekend. I really was, because I felt we've not seen enough of him. He's coming with a heavy price tag on his head, and I expected him to be the guy of the front signings that would really light it up for Rangers and kind of take that responsibility to be the to lead Rangers attack. Unfortunately, I've not seen enough of him, and then he gets injured. So at this moment, Raskin would be right at the heart of that midfield. And I think if everybody's fit, I would like probably maybe Ryan Jack alongside him. And I think as a front line, again, Danilo, if he was fit, I think he needs to be the number 9, with Kamara Roof probably just playing off him for the left. And I think if you've got Todd Cantwell and Tom Lawrence in the team, I think that's a really, really good looking front 4, if you want to call it that, front 4. Sure. Of Lawrence, Cantwell, Roof and Danilo. But you could attach Todd Cantwell to that in the midfield as well. So for me, it would be Raskin, either Jack or Lundstrom. I know Ryan I think he's a really important player for Rangers when he's fit, because I think he brings a certain level of control and composure on the ball. But it's been, can he play the 2-3 game weeks when you're looking at this? So I think between him and Lundstrom, you've got good options there. And Cifuentes will come into the reckoning, there's no doubt about it. I think he's an animal in the middle of the pitch, Cifuentes. You know, he's got great legs. It looks like he wants to burst forward as well. He looks like he could be a box-to-box player. So again, it's about him settling, and it's about finding the right role in the team for him. You know, and that's Michael and his staff's job, is to find the right way playing for the players that you've actually got. And that's something at this moment I don't really think they have. So in relation to the midfield, Jip, I would say Raskin alongside Jack or Lundstrom, maybe both of them at some times if Todd Cantwell was pushed on into the front 3. But I like Todd Cantwell and Tom Lawrence. I really like the thought of they two guys playing together and linking up together, and the freedom that they would have to kind of move for positions and support the forwards. I really would like that. But unfortunately for Michael, Todd Cantwell's injured, so it really falls on where you deploy him, because I think he's really flexible in where he can play and he can affect the game. But one thing's for sure, he needs to be playing. And unfortunate for Michael, he's got Rascan and Cantwell probably missing for the foreseeable. When I'm talking about small steps, the last thing you need is 2 of your key players injured.
No, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, as you mentioned there, Tom Lawrence coming back, he was probably the class act really at St Johnstone, wasn't he? And the pass for the Matondo goal, it's not every player who can play that kind of pass first time. There's a kind of player that Rangers are crying out for.
It is, and you know, it is great to see him back, and he was, for me, the standout performer in the game. Not only with the pass and a lot of the attacking stuff that you see, he's got good movement off the ball, which, again, something I think that might kind of have a hand in why Rangers attacked a little bit better, in my opinion, at the weekend, because he does look to run beyond the striker. He can easily be involved in the playmaking as well alongside the midfielders, and that's where you're saying there is a freedom within Rangers attack and play between that kind of 3 or 4 front players that they can kind of go and get involved in different areas of the game. But it was outstanding. Like you say, that pass, that's just, you know, for me, it's like the execution of the pass and the vision is great, but it's actually the understanding of what's going on in the game at that moment. He recognises that he's got a flying machine on his left flank and he's got half a pitch to hit it into. Tom Lawrence just put the ball in the space and says, on you go, Rabbi. Go and do your stuff, and then touch, goal, and it's game over. So it was. He had a really big impact in the game, and he will have a big impact for Rangers this season. Again, really important that it builds up to that level of fitness, because he's been out for almost a year as well, or just over a year, I think it might have been. So it's really good to see him back in terms of the first start, and he'll be a big player for Rangers. Like I says, I would really be excited to see him and Todd Cantwell on the same team.
As for Real Betis, then, they were thumped 5-0 away to Barcelona on Saturday night. I always find it difficult to gauge the relative strengths of teams when they're playing such different standard of oppositions, obviously, in the game before. But you would expect Betis to offer Rangers a fairly stiff test, wouldn't you?
I think this will be their biggest test, even the fact that it's at home. I remember the Betis team that played against Celtic a couple of seasons ago, and there was two fantastic games that they're going to attack. They'll score goals, like you say. The relevance of the result against Barcelona, which really until the first goal went in, it was a contest. You know, they were well in the game. Yeah, and Barcelona can do that to anyone. So, like you say, when you look at the levels of opposition, it's hard to judge where Rangers are in relation to their improvements, and actually what does that mean in terms of a Betis. But they'll come and they'll be the sternest task out of this group. Even though it's at home, Betis will prove a real threat to Rangers. And, you know, it's one of them where Rangers will be favourites because they're the top seeds and they're home. But Betis will be coming here to win. I expect them to come and give Rangers a real test. But it's a home game, and when you can put teams under pressure, Rangers have done that over the years at Ibrox. You can put good teams under pressure, and if you're constantly on that front foot and you're aggressive in how you're actually playing both on and off the ball, and you get that 50,000 behind you, magic things can happen, you know. So it's a good start for Rangers, because again, it's probably going to be their toughest test against a team that might have a few injury problems, but it's one where it's not going to be easy, that's for sure, because Betis are a good.
Definitely not. Well, that game at Ibrox is an 8 o'clock kickoff on Thursday night. Join me on Sports Sound for live commentary of that one. Earlier in the evening, Aberdeen faced Rangers, Europa League final conquerors of 2 years ago, Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany. It's been a dreadful start to the season for Barry Robson and the Dons, losing their last 3 games. Their only victory coming against Stirling Albion in the League Cup. That looks a tough tie for them, Kenny.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd go as far as saying if they can come away with any kind of point, it would be an incredible result, because Frankfurt, as much as they've probably had a kind of mediocre start to the season, they're playing at a top level. Good team, like you say. It was only, what was that, a matter of kind of just over a year ago or whatever it was that they won the Europa League against Rangers. So it's a really tough game for Barry Robson and Aberdeen. And it's not just about the level of opponents, it's where they're at. They're really struggling. They're 5 domestic games in without a win. They're not in a good place. So this is not a game I think any Aberdeen fan will be going into with any real confidence of coming away with anything. So, but what I would say is, obviously, the domestic scene is going to be far more important for Aberdeen than a Europa League campaign. This will be great for the 3 home games, 3 home gates. Again, there's a financial reward that obviously comes with being in European group stage football, which will have been great for Aberdeen this year. But they need to really come away, as for me, unscathed as possible, because they're quite a tough group, and this is a really tough start for them, because this will be new. a new experience for a lot of the players playing in these group stages, and then having to juggle the kind of Thursday, Sunday kind of feel as well, and the pressures that come along with that as well, where you're actually teams that you're maybe looking at going toe-to-toe for top 6, for top 3, for top 4 in European slots for next season, maybe just get the jump on them because they've got the freedom of playing on the Saturday and not having the European commitment. So it's something that it's again, it'll be new for Barry as a manager, as a young manager, and just new in the job, kind of having to deal with that and squad rotations, trying to maximise what he's got at his disposal. Whilst, by the way, they're not in a good moment in terms of their current form.
Well, unfortunately, Aberdeen's pre-match media conference was taking place too late to include in this podcast. But what we can offer you is some insight into Aberdeen's opponents from ESPN's lead Bundesliga commentator, Derek Rae.
It's not an easy start for Aberdeen. There's no doubt about that, because Eintracht Frankfurt will be going into the Conference League firmly believing that they can win it. They will see that as the ultimate goal. They're not there just to make up the numbers. They are there because they feel they are amongst the elite. And of course, they really wanted to play in the Europa League as opposed to the Conference League, but that's how the chips fell. And of course, everybody in Scotland knows that they beat Rangers in the final of the Europa League a couple of years ago. They're a massive institution and they sell out every game. It's a passionate football club and a traditional football club, a team that's respected up and down Germany, like Aberdeen, of course, a European trophy in the dim and distant past in 1980 in the UEFA Cup. All in all, for Aberdeen, doesn't get much more difficult for starters. You would say, first of all, that they're a team in transition. So maybe that does give Aberdeen some hope. They're not the club they were a couple of years ago when they won the Europa League. But I think the strengths are more middle to front. I think if you want to identify weaknesses, you might say defensively. That's still difficult to say at the moment because they are in transition. The one player I always like to identify is Mario Götze, because everybody will know him as the player who scored the winning goal in the 2014 World Cup final. If they are troubled at all, it's often by teams that will go in with that sort of idea of, having just about everybody behind the ball, and how do you break them down? Sometimes there's a lack of guile there. And I think if you're looking at a glaring weakness at the moment, you'd probably say in the striking positions, there's sometimes a lack of consistency with Eintracht. And so if they were to have a bad night, and, that can easily happen, then who's to say? They'll want to make a very bright start in front of their own public. These are big occasions, these European nights for Eintracht Frankfurt. And that's the one thing that Aberdeen need to be ready for, is an atmosphere unlike anything that you experience in Scotland week in, week out. Aberdeen don't want to concede an early goal. Could be a long night for Aberdeen on that basis. But if they do frustrate for a while, and if they do create the odd chance, then that might just plant the seed of fear in Eintracht Frankfurt minds. But as I said, it's going to be a hot atmosphere. It will be noisy the whole time. That's how the Frankfurt fans operate. So dare I say a baptism of fire for Aberdeen in the Conference League. But honestly, these are the things that as a football fan you enjoy. I'll guarantee that the Aberdeen fans who are in Frankfurt will have memories that will last a long time, because it is a special place to go and watch a game.
Just finally, Kenny, why do you think things have started so poorly for Aberdeen this season when they did so well when Barry Robson took over an interim charge? Is it just down to the huge turnover in the squad, do you think?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, to be honest with you. It's because I don't think they finished strongly last season. I know it's obviously top 6 and you're playing against all the best, all the better opponents that are in the league, but I don't think they had that spell where they won 7 games in a row, which for any team in the league to actually do, particularly out with the Old Firm, it was an incredible run of results whilst Barry was in interim charge. It got him the job. I think after when he went in permanent, it was named, I don't think the form was particularly good, so they never finished last season on great form. And then there has been a big turnaround in players, particularly at the back. I mean, if you think of the players that came in, when Barry immediately got the job, one of his first actions was getting rid of the captain and sending him back down to England. And then he brought in the 2 lads who were absolutely massive and monsters at the back for him, like real diehard defenders. And, as much as the lads has brought in Luke O'Kay, they've just not quite had that impact on the team the way they did last season. And watching Aberdeen, I think the way they set up, like they've got some wonderful attacking players, I think, in Miovski and Duk, who, again, they're in the off. I think when I'm watching them, they're playing okay, but Duke's not quite hit the heights as in terms of goal scoring heights that he hit last season. Jamie McGrath coming in as well, good player. Leighton Clarkson's coming in. Graham Shinney was a great signing, but I felt last season they were quite solid defensively, and they were really relying on a Duke and a Miovski to go and do their thing. You know, which is great. It's fine, and it worked over that kind of 7-8 game spell that we're talking about. After it, not so much. And this season, not so much. And what they're doing, they're not defending as well as what they were last season. I mean, Aberdeen, let's be honest, when you're starting a first 5 games of the league season, they'll be looking to hit the ground running. We're going to be looking again to probably get third spot in the league. And they've not won a game. I mean, the season's not going to get away for you. There's still a long, long way to go. But it's just, as each game goes past and you've not won, that pressure kind of mounts to get that result. And obviously coming off the back of an away trip to Eintracht Frankfurt and then having Ross County, albeit at home, the travelling that comes in around that, you're playing a Ross County team that have started the season pretty well, even in defeat on an opening day. They came away with a bit of credit for that Celtic Park defeat. So it's really testing times for Barry Robson in the early stages of being the Aberdeen manager. But brilliant experience, but he needs to start winning games domestically. It's a big test. It's a big test for Barry Robson all round, and you know it's a brilliant experience for him to be in. Have this European football. I mean, he's less than what's that been in terms of actually having the job? Probably 6 months or so.
Yeah.
He's been as the manager of Aberdeen, and he's dealt with finishing third, which was a brilliant. He's dealt with a really good run of games. He's now had a tough start to the season. He's got a European run to look forward to. So it's real big tests, and it'll all be a part of the learning curve for Barry. But like I say, domestically, they need to start winning games.
Yeah, well, hopefully they can defy the odds and produce a positive result, and Rangers can get off the mark with a home victory. You won't miss a thing at BBC Scotland with live coverage online, on digital and on radio from 5:05 on Thursday. And we'll have all the reaction to those games in our next podcast. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
From BBC Radio Scotland.
BBC Sounds.